y'all, I gotta tell you how the Lord like basically answered a prayer for me instantly in order to set it up so that I would plant this seed to my husband about the prayer and about in the Bible how it aligned kind of with what God had answered. And it shocked the purity crap out of me because I did not expect God to do it. Not because I don't believe that he can do it. I know God can do anything. Nothing is impossible for him. But at the same time, it's just what was going on. Let me just say. So my husband had this lighter that he was trying to use, right? And y'all know when lighters are out of fluid, like it just flicks, right? And that's all I kept hearing was the flicking over and over and over again. And he was like, no, he was like, this is my good vibes lighter. And I could hear him like, come on, good vibes, you know, trying to get it to work. And it wasn't working because it was out of fluid, right? So he like starts to kind of look around his area to see if there was another lighter near him. And in that moment, I prayed. I said, you know what, Lord? I said, you should light that lighter. Not because of anything, just so we know that it won't nobody but you who allowed this lighter to be lit, right? Like we're going to know it won't nobody but God who lit this lighter, right? And then I was like, you know what, Lord, never mind. I shouldn't be asking for that because I knew what the lighter was going to be used for, right? But my heart posture wasn't for that. It was because I just wanted to see it lit because then I would know it was nobody but God that did it. So I just kind of let it go. You know what I'm saying? Because I was like, you know what, Lord, never mind or whatever. And plus, my husband wasn't even worried about that lighter anymore because it wasn't freaking working, right? But for whatever reason, he goes back to that lighter, okay? And when he lights it, I could hear it like light. Like I could hear that it worked. And I was like, oh my gosh. And I started laughing. And I said, wait a minute. I said, is that the same lighter that you were just trying or is that a new one? He was like, no, it's the same one that wasn't working. I said, did you use anything to try and like get it lit? He was like, no, it just lit. And I was like, bro. And I told him, I was like, and that was the door of opportunity. I told him, I said, I just prayed. I just wanted to see and ask God, like, Lord, so that we would know it was nobody but you that lit that freaking lighter. And what was even more beautiful about this situation, y'all, is my husband, when I told him that, he didn't doubt in the least say, you know how some worldly, carnal-minded people will be like, oh, well, it just lit because, you know, no. I prayed to my God in my head and asked him to do this, you know, because my heart posture was like, Lord, I know that it's going to be nobody but you that did this. You know, that's all I wanted to see was that it was nobody but freaking God that did this, bro. And so I told my husband, and he like starts, I could tell like he started smiling, you know what I'm saying? Because he was shocked himself, right? And in that moment, God not only opened the door for me to plant that seed because he knew that I was going to tell my husband that I prayed for it, but it also opened up the door for me to talk about in the Bible in 1 Kings, chapter 18 with Elijah. Y'all remember, and I'm paraphrasing this, okay? Please go read it for yourself. But when Elijah had the prophets about, you know, both of them made the same altar with the bull, with the wood, with the water, everything, right? And Elijah told them, pray to your God, right, to light up this altar. And they praying and just all day, like crying out to this God of Baal or whatever, you know, to light up this altar, and nothing was happening. They started cutting themselves and all this crazy stuff. And Elijah starts mocking them about it, like, oh, maybe he's asleep, maybe he's relieving himself. Y'all know, y'all read it, you know, right? But then Elijah goes to his altar and he prays to God, and God lights that freaking altar up just to prove that it won't nobody but him who did it. Just to prove that nobody, no matter what, you know, who you call on, who you consider, whatever, they cannot do what God can do. Only God can do what God does. You understand what I'm saying? So that it was just perfect because then I told him the Bible, and God knew I was going to do that, bro. I'm gonna tell y'all something. I love God. I love God so much, bro. I will look for any opportunity to talk about him, and I do talk about him to my husband a lot. Like even after that moment happened, we started to talk about God. You know, it's just all about planting seeds, bro. I told you before, there's a planter, there's a waterer, and God is the one that causes it to grow, right? He will. It don't matter what the situation is. Please take this away from this message. It don't matter what the situation is. God can be used in any and all situations to show who he is and also to plant a seed into anybody. And I was so grateful to God, bro. I was shocked because I did not think. And again, y'all, it's not because I doubt God. It's just because I didn't, you know. So, but the fact that he did it, bro, it is so amazing, like how God works, the things that he does, and the fact that he knew I was going to take that opportunity to not only tell my husband that I prayed and God came through, but also to open up the door for me to talk about the Bible and the, you know, the story of Elijah and them as a way that it kind of aligned. Because you think about it like this, the prophets of Baal that were praying to their God or whatever to light that altar was almost kind of like my husband when he was like, come on, good vibes, this is my good vibes lighter, and nothing was happening, right? But as soon as I prayed to my God about it, the freaking lighter lit. And what was so beautiful about this moment too, y'all, is it made me feel like seen and heard by God. And I know that goes without saying because God sees all, he hears all, right? But y'all know, if you know, you know, sometimes like when you're talking to God and you don't really feel like he's speaking back, or maybe like you're, you know, praying for certain things and you don't see the fruit of that yet or whatever, sometimes you can feel like, you know, does God hear me? Does God see me? And in that moment, not only did God open up that door of opportunity because he, again, like I said, he knew that I was going to tell my husband that I prayed and then to talk about the Bible, right? But he also showed me, yes, I'm here. Yes, I do hear you. Yes, I do see you, right? And it made me feel so good too. Anyways, y'all, I'm gonna go ahead and wrap this up with the devotional for today from The Chosen, right? And it's in regards to John chapter 4 about the woman at the well, okay? It was high noon in Samaria and Jesus was talking to a woman, okay? Which is already a big thing, right? That moment was remarkable because Jews typically hated Samaritans. She was a Samaritan, right? The offspring of intermarriage, which Jewish law prohibited. They were a nation of people who were half Jew and half Gentile. Y'all remember when the Israelites crossed over, one of the laws that God told them was like, don't intermarry, don't intermingle with the pagans, with the Gentiles, right? But as we know, some of the Israelites did, okay? And therefore, wholly despised, right? Samaritans were pretty much despised. In fact, even though Samaria was located in between, when traveling from Judea to Galilee, Jews added days to their journey by walking clear around it. That's how much they were against it. They didn't want nothing to do with them, right? But not Jesus, okay? Also remarkable was the timing because water was always drawn in the morning when the sun was still low. The well was on the outskirts of town and the work was arduous. I probably said that wrong. Drawing water at noon in the desert heat was a clear sign this woman was avoiding people, okay? And Jesus knew why. Jesus said to her, go, call your husband and come here. The woman answered him, I have no husband. Jesus said to her, you are right in saying I have no husband, for you have had 5 husbands, right? And the one you have now is not your husband. What you have said is true, okay? Her reputation preceded her probably everywhere she went, right? She had been used or tossed away, okay? Or maybe she was in the habit of tossing men away. She was basically trying to find love, essentially, okay? Which I know everybody should probably relate to, okay? Whatever the reason, her life was wrought with scandal and void of friendship, right? People didn't want anything to do with her. Not only the fact that she was a woman, a Samaritan woman, and she had been with quite a few men, okay? I can only imagine what the townspeople said behind her back, or maybe to her face, which made what come next the most remarkable of all. The woman said to him, I know that Messiah is coming, he who is called Christ. When he comes, he would tell us all things, right? And Jesus said to her, I who speak to you am he, right? Those 7 words spoken to the least likely of humans changed the course of history. I who speak to you am he. Until that moment, Jesus had only implied his true identity, the actual words, the announcement of God's arrival on earth, the fulfillment of hundreds of years of prophecy, right? The master's plan to restore the whole of creation were whispered to the one no one wanted, okay? He said who he was to a woman that nobody wanted anything to do with because of her reputation, right? Because of her history, okay? He knew she'd be there, okay? He knew her name and her pain and her need. She was, in fact, the reason he came. God calls the sick, not the healthy. That's in his word, okay? Because from the well of Christ's immense and indiscriminating mercy flows his mission to rescue and redeem the lost. Whoever drinks of the water that I give them will never thirst. Indeed, the water I give them will become in them a spring of water welling up to eternal life. And then on top of that, y'all, once she realized, like, who he was, right, that he was the Messiah that they heard was to come, right, she went and told people. She went and told who he was, what he said to her, and everything. Like, she basically spread the word. And she was the first person to start to spread the word of Jesus' arrival to the Gentiles.